All right, we're live. There was a little bit of technical difficulty figuring out how to get on, but we're here, we're live, and we're good to go. So, I want to give a little bit of a preface before I dive into my talk for today. Um, I think it's so this summer I've been participating in an internship with another YouTuber named Kara, and it's largely been revolving around creating YouTube content and learning a lot about my own religious path, which is paganism. And so that's been really enjoyable and really beneficial and really helpful. I've really learned a lot. Um, and so part of the internship has been creating rituals, not just pagan rituals, but also Unitarian Universalist rituals, or services, I should say, because a lot of pagans do find a home within Unitarian Universalism. Um, and so this is my Unitarian Universalist talk. This is a talk that I wrote within the framework of Unitarian Universalism, and it's called Cross the Line. It's based off of a Broadway musical song, and I don't want to explain too much further because I do explain it in the talk. So without any further ado, hello, my name is Madeline Jones, and this is Cross the Line. I have a question for you. How many of you have played the popular tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons? Even if you haven't played the game, you might be familiar with the alignment system associated with the game. After all, it's basically become a meme at this point. But for those of you who might have no idea what I'm talking about, allow me to get you up to speed right quick. See, a person's alignment basically has to do with two things: what their morals are and how they go about achieving their goals. So on one axis, you have good, neutral, and evil, and on the other axis, you have lawful, neutral, and chaotic. The point where those two axes intersect is known as your alignment. So someone who will throw a Molotov cocktail to overthrow a corrupt government, probably chaotic good. Someone who works within that corrupt government to advance their own interests, making sure to never break the law or do anything that would make them look bad, probably lawful evil. Make sense? If not, don't stress about it. I promise the majority of this talk should still make sense. I myself happen to be lawful good. I want to make the world a better place, but I don't want to get in trouble if I can avoid it. When people ask me what needs to happen to change the world, my answer is always revolution. But I say this while sitting comfortably in my living room, drinking a nice hot cup of tea. Even when I take to the streets and demand justice, I stay in the designated zone for protesters and leave before the curfew goes into effect. I hear the late Representative John Lewis when he says that we need to be getting into good trouble, but I know that good trouble often means getting arrested, and for a black trans woman, an arrest could be absolutely catastrophic. Maybe, just maybe, I'd be neutral good or even chaotic good if I knew I had some really good plot armor. For those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, it relates to characters in books and TV shows and movies who you know beyond a shadow of a doubt can't die. For example, in the anime My Hero Academia, the protagonist, Izuku Midoriya, literally says in most of the episodes, "This is the story of how I became the greatest hero in the world." So you pretty much know he's going to make it out okay, even when things are especially harrowing and you don't know how he's going to get out of a situation. You pretty much know that he's going to be fine. There wouldn't be a story without him. If I could be certain that I'd make it out okay, you'd probably find me on the front lines of any given protest at any given time. But in reality, I shake like a leaf whenever I have to respond to a negative comment here on my YouTube channel. In reality, I'm an anxious bab. In reality, you can often find me nestled comfortably under the covers, rambling to my fiance about how I don't know what to do in order to change the world. But see, here's the thing. I firmly believe that there is something, possibly even several somethings, that we can do in order to make the world more just, more kind, more compassionate, and more equitable. The thing is, a lot of us will stop short of affecting the kind of change we want to see in the world because we're not willing to cross the line. A few years ago, my sister operated the lights for a local production of the hit Broadway musical Bring It On, which was written in part by Hamilton and Moana writer Lin-Manuel Miranda, and is loosely based on the hit 2000 movie of the same name. They're both about cheerleading and racial tension, but the similarities basically end there. But yeah, since my sister was part of the show, I ended up watching it several times and ended up helping out backstage for several more performances, to the point where I would actually sing from time to time as part of the ensemble, because I knew practically all of the words to all of the songs. And one of the songs that really stuck out to me was called Cross the Line. I'm not going to sing the song because I don't think I do it justice, but I want to read some of the lyrics to you. When we were young and unafraid, we climbed the highest wall we could find. When we were young and unafraid, we'd draw a line in the sand just to cross it. We'd fall just to feel alive. We knew we'd be all right. I want to fall just to feel alive. I feel like following me tonight. How do we know who we are unless we cross the line? It's a super fun song, really makes me miss musical theater and regret the fact that I never got to be a cheerleader, but I digress. What does this song have to do with social justice? Well, let's unpack that starting at the beginning. When we were young and unafraid, we'd climb the highest wall we could find. Two things to unpack there right from the get-go. A lot of y'all will probably laugh at the fact that I feel kind of old when I think of the line when we were young and unafraid. I'm only 25, so let's be real, I'm still pretty young. But to put things into perspective, this song is sung from the perspective of high schoolers, like people who are traditionally between the ages of 14 and 18. So when they're talking about being young and unafraid, they're talking about being super young, an age where people often know no fear beyond the shadows on the wall and the monsters under the bed, an age where people also have some of the brightest and most colorful imaginations. If we're making the world more just, more kind, more equitable, and more compassionate, it starts with having the imagination required to envision more effective solutions to the problems we have. When the world needs fundamental structural change, tweaking a few things here and there isn't going to solve the problem. More on that later. Getting back to the song, when we were young and unafraid, we'd climb the highest wall we could find. On the one hand, this song is likely referring to physical activity. This is a musical about athletics after all. But what happens when we view this lyric in a metaphorical way? We'd climb the highest wall we could find. In other words, we'd aspire to the greatest heights we could dream of. We wouldn't settle for anything less than our very best, and we'd expect the same of our leaders. Free from the self-imposed shackles of limited imagination, we'd realize that when it comes to saving the world from ourselves, there really isn't such thing as having too much ambition. Then again, my Harry Potter Hogwarts house is Slytherin, and... Then again, my Hogwarts house is Slytherin, and Slytherins are all about ambition. J.K. Rowling may be dead to me because of all her recent transphobia, but while she may have written Harry Potter, the fandom is so much bigger than her, and I'll be a Slytherin for as long as I live. Slytherin or not, however, we so often get caught up in what we think is possible that we underestimate ourselves and end up falling far short of what could be. One of my favorite quotes of all time actually comes from a video game, Final Fantasy XIII. And in it, the main character, Lightning Farron, declares, in defiance of the very gods who have always dictated her fate, "We live to make the impossible possible. That is our focus." And if we approach life from the perspective that we were going to make the impossible possible every single day, we'd find a way to reverse the climate crisis. We'd find a way to end police brutality. We'd find a way to give everybody health care. We'd find a way to end the school-to-prison pipeline. We'd find a way to treat all living things with dignity and compassion. We'd find solutions, and we'd find them in record time. When we were young and unafraid, we'd draw a line in the sand just to cross it. Do you ever wonder why world record holders are always beating their own records? Why athletes are always pushing themselves to jump higher, run faster, swim longer, throw further? Why artists are always trying to make beautiful things even more beautiful? Why chefs and bakers are always trying to make tastier dishes? It's because we have an innate desire to surpass our own limitations. And make no mistake, this can be catastrophic when unchecked. In the business world, uncontrolled growth is greed, especially as it pertains to the acquisition of wealth. In the medical world, uncontrolled growth is called cancer when we're looking at things from a cellular level. In the academic world, which is the world that I'm most familiar with, uncontrolled growth without adequate time for rest can lead to burnout, which can lead to sickness, perpetual exhaustion, and even death. There's a fine line between encouraging people to do their best and pushing people to the point where they're at their worst. And that's one line that's best not to cross. But let's think about it this way. When we want plants to grow, what do? We tend to the soil. We provide the plant with sunlight and water and nutrients. And most importantly, we're patient. We recognize that growth doesn't happen overnight. And while we wait, we create the right environment for new life to spring forth. In many ways, humans are just houseplants with complicated emotions, and societal change looks a lot like tending to a field or a garden. Perhaps when the prophet Isaiah said, "They shall beat their swords into plowshares," he meant that true revolution, the type of revolution that actually changes hearts and minds, looks a lot less like war and a lot more like farming. We'd fall just to feel alive. We knew we would be all right. When I hear this lyric, I'm reminded of a quote from theologian Howard Thurman, who said, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive." One of the questions that I found myself running into multiple times in my admittedly short life is, how am I supposed to make a difference? How am I supposed to change the world? Strangely enough, despite being someone who has issues with self-love and self-worth, I've somehow never doubted that I was supposed to do big things in life. I suppose I can thank my family and teachers for that. But I think that a lot of people want to know how they can make a difference, how they can change the world for the better. Especially in my generation. I was born on the cusp of Gen Y and Gen Z, having been born in 1996. And I identify more with Gen Z, primarily because I was raised with my little sister, who was born in 2002 and is a Gen Z kid through and through. But whether I'm technically Gen Y or Gen Z, both generations have been raised on a diet of books and movies, from Harry Potter to The Hunger Games, which are all about young people taking on the world and changing it for the better, forever, permanently. And not in small ways either, but literally shaking the foundation of the world to its very core. As kids, we were raised on a steady diet of badass young people saving the world from evil, and now that we're young adults, we're faced with a global environmental crisis that's fueled by late-stage capitalism and multiple world governments that more often than not appear completely inept before the challenges we're facing. Can you blame us for feeling like the protagonist in a dystopian novel? But so often, we don't know what to do. We tweet and post with all the trending hashtags. We write our government officials who so often ignore us until it's time to ask for money that we don't have. We go to protest so we can feel like we're being heard, while also knowing that the best way to be heard is actually to get in good trouble, and a lot of us can't afford to do that. We're often made to feel powerless, and in so many ways that's by design. But if Howard Thurman is to be believed, the thing that all of us, young and old, black and white, cishet and LGBT, need in order to reclaim that power is to do what we love, to do what we were placed here on this planet to do. I want to preface this next statement by saying that for a pagan, I really quote the Bible a lot, but I'm also in divinity school, which is a Christian context, and that's just how it works out sometimes. But yeah, just like how in the book of Ephesians, the author says the gifts that he gave were that some would be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers. The gifts that the universe gives us are numerous. By virtue of being endowed with certain gifts and talents and passions, some of us are called to change the world through juggling. Some of us are called to change the world through landscaping. Some of us are called to run for office, while others of us are called to run the 100-meter dash. Not all of us were called to be on the front lines organizing protests, because as the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians, if the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? We're not all called to do the same thing when it comes to changing the world, and no job is more or less important than the others. After processing a lot of tumultuous emotions last summer as I watched all of the protests going on around the world and longed to be a part of them, I eventually realized that my job is to write poetry, to write script for my YouTube videos about LGBT issues and mental health, to write my young adult novel about societal injustice and inequality. My job is to write. I'm not necessarily called to organize. I'm not necessarily called to march. I'm called to write. My job is to write. And I want you to ask yourself what your job is. And no, I'm not talking about what you do to make a living, though that could definitely be it, or at least a part of it. I'm asking you what your thing is that makes you come alive. Because if we're serious about changing the world, that's where we need to start. And the thing is, so many people are disconnected from what makes them come alive because they think it's not important because they don't know how to make money doing it. I think that a lot of people are afraid to say, what makes me come alive is playing video games. What makes me come alive is doing my makeup. What makes me come alive is football. What makes me come alive is going to the bar with my friends. But think about it. Do you know how much of an impact you could make on YouTube or Twitch, the popular streaming site, playing video games and talking about the things that are important to you? Do you know how much of an impact you could have as a makeup artist, teaching people of all genders how to express themselves and love themselves for who they are? Let me tell you, as a trans woman, I am eternally grateful to the women who taught me how to paint my face. And even though I don't often wear makeup, I don't think I'd have half the confidence I do, with or without makeup, without these lovely people showing me the ropes and encouraging me along the way. If your passion is football, then play football. Coach football. I may not know much about the sports world, but I know that for athletes, the two kinds of people they often look up to most tend to be coaches and other athletes. Use your platform for good. Use your sport to better yourself in the world around you. And for those of you whose joy is going out to the bar with your friend, who's to say you can't encourage your friends, uplift your friends, educate your friends, dispel misconceptions and prejudices amongst your friends? Do you see what I'm saying? If your goal is to make the world more just, more kind, more equitable, and more compassionate, I literally can't imagine a scenario where the thing that makes you come alive can't accomplish that goal. Not a single one. Getting back to the song, I want to fall just to feel alive. I feel like following me tonight. There's another quote from Final Fantasy XIII that I really love. What can I say? It's my favorite video game of all time. This time it comes from a character named Hope Lestime, who is the youngest character in the game at the age of 14, and honestly, Hope isn't most people's favorite character. He cries a lot, he has a lot of misplaced aggression, he's super dependent on Lightning for like the first 9 chapters of this 13-chapter video game, and a lot of players just got annoyed with the way he carried himself. But at the same time, he just lost his mom while he was on vacation. He's turned into the eternal slave of a dying god from an enemy nation, branded an enemy of the only country he's ever known, and forced to travel with the man who indirectly is responsible for the untimely death of his mother. Of the 6 playable characters in the game, he definitely had the worst in my opinion, and I didn't think he was unreasonably emotional or vengeful. But about 2/3 of the way through the game, he surprises the party by declaring that he's ready to stand on his own 2 feet. His words are, "From here on out I use my eyes, think, and act. I may not make all of the right decisions, but as long as I'm the one who decides what to do, there's nothing to regret." And it's not a quote that I like because I agree with it entirely. I do believe that people make plenty of decisions that they should regret, even if they're the ones who made the decision of their own volition. But I do think it perfectly encapsulates the essence of the lyric, "I feel like following me tonight," because I don't think it's a matter of never following anyone else's leadership. I don't think it's a matter of trying to go it alone, because just like cheerleading, changing the world for the better is a team sport. No, I think it's saying that we are ultimately responsible for our own decisions. Yes, we are created by the systems that we exist in, but we aren't powerless to change those systems. We don't just have to go along with those systems. We follow the guidance of our own hearts, of our own souls, and we try to make a difference. And yes, we may make mistakes. In fact, it's pretty much a guarantee that we will. But so long as our choices are rooted in justice, in kindness, in equity, in compassion, I think we can all live a life that we're proud of, and a life that creates real, tangible results in the world around us. And that brings us to the end of the lyrics that I've chosen to focus on for this talk. How do we know who we are unless we cross the line? Earlier, I said that changing the world starts with having the imagination required to envision more effective solutions to the problems we have. When the world needs fundamental structural change, tweaking a few things here and there isn't going to solve the problem. And I firmly believe that because when you make just a few changes to an oppressive system, you end up with an oppressive system that might be slightly less oppressive than it was before. To use just one example, the criminal justice system was designed to keep people of color oppressed. Our modern-day police force grew directly out of the 1800s slave patrol, and the cops who turned dogs and fire hoses on black people during the civil rights era are the ancestors and teachers of the very same cops who kill unarmed black people today. So how much good is it going to do to introduce anti-racist training to a police force that is inherently racist? And to be clear, I'm not saying that every single law enforcement agent is racist, far from it. But every single law enforcement agent works for a system that is blatantly racist, regardless of the individual officer's intent. So what does crossing the line look like for changing the criminal justice system? Maybe it looks like daring to say that we should defund the police and reallocate resources to social workers, mental health professionals, and other institutions that are often more capable of handling situations like domestic abuse calls or disturbances from people who are having mental health episodes. Or maybe it even looks like abolishing the police and replacing the old racist system with something new entirely. I'm not coming at you today with clear answers. I think it would be incredibly arrogant of me to stand before you today and say, here's what you need to do, now go do it. At the end of the day, I'm just a concerned citizen who knows that something needs to change. That being said, I'm a concerned citizen who believes that in nearly every situation that we face as a community, the answer can only be found by crossing the line. How do we give everyone health care? We cross the line and make it happen. How do we improve the K-12 educational system for all of our students? We cross the line and make it happen. How do we excuse me. How do we put an end to political corruption? We cross the line and make it happen. No more. How do we put an end to animal cruelty? How do we put an end to environmental devastation? We cross the line and make it happen. No more tweaks, no more small changes. Now is the time for radical change. Now is the time for revolution. And when I envision millions of people working together, armed with the limitless power of childlike imagination, there isn't a single doubt in my head that we can make the world more just, more kind, more equitable, and more compassionate. There isn't a single doubt in my mind. I want to take a moment to thank you for taking the time to listen to me speak today. To quote a lyric from Hamilton, another Lin-Manuel Miranda play, you could have been anywhere in the world tonight, but you're here with us. Not necessarily in the same physical location, but still together in spirit. And I am grateful that you chose to spend this time with me today. I can't wait to see where you all cross the line in your own daily lives. I know that I also can't wait to figure out what I end up doing. Definitely writing, definitely filming, definitely going to classes and trying to keep my head above water. But beyond that, everything's up in the air. And honestly, that's kind of exciting to me. Thank you once again for coming to my talk. And if you take nothing else from my talk, let it be this little benediction that I include at the end of my videos. Remember that you're wonderful, and that the world is a better place because you're in it. And as always, thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye.